Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn even more money. All in one place, and it's for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup looks like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. Best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we feel like having options like video podcasts, Q&A, and polls has let us be creative on a whole other level. I highly recommend you give it a try. So download Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
Welcome back, Exes and T podcast fans. Hey, it's Danny here, you guys. We're back at it again with another episode, and we're back at it again with another episode about, you guessed it, Worldwide Dream Builders and Amway. You guys, I'm beginning to love this so much. Like, I loved it before, but I just love it so much more now because I've learned so many horrendous things about these two organizations and what they've done to people. And the more I get to talk about it and expose them, just the more that I hope that it helps other people. So with that being said, I am not here to defame Worldwide Dream Builders. I'm not here to defame Amway. I have beef with these two corporations. I don't support them. That being said, I also think that if you want to join, you're an adult, you are welcome to make your own decisions. I would highly encourage you to listen to stories. Everything that I'm saying is based on personal opinions and personal experiences. Every guest that I have comes on and speaks on their own personal experiences, their own opinions. And don't sue me. You guys, I'm really excited. We have a regular who is back with us. It has been so long since we have had our good friend to the north for me. I know we have some folks a little bit of everywhere in the world at this point. To me, she's to the north. My first ever Canadian friend that ever came on the show. We have back with us Hope. You guys, she is growing an entire human. So we are so grateful that she even had the time to come here and be with us. So thank you so much, Hope, for coming back.
Hello. Always happy to be here.
Always a good time. I am really excited about this topic because what a great time to talk about it. I've had this question and I thought, who better to talk about it with than you? And that was, what was it like being pregnant while we were in Amway? And you being pregnant now, I think it's pretty cool that you kind of get to go back on your experiences at that point compared to now. And when it came to your time in Amway and Worldwide and being pregnant, just kind of in a quick summary, like, what are some words that come to mind? Like, what emotions did you have throughout the entirety of your pregnancy in Worldwide?
I was tired. I was very tired throughout most of my pregnancy in Worldwide. There is some slight contrast. Like, I didn't work while I was pregnant with my son and in Worldwide. This time I am working full time, but I'm also working remote, so that's fun. But yeah, no, it was very tiresome. A lot of expectations are on you because I don't know if everybody has experienced this, but definitely in Alberta, every woman was pregnant all the time. There was at least 20% of the women at every major function was massively pregnant. So there was always this standard of how you were supposed to handle yourself, how often you should go to the bathroom and walk around and do all these things, because people that went before you that they gritted through it and they were tough, and it's there was just a lot of expectations that I don't have this time, and I love.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make a really good point, because I always hated having to get up and pee regardless. But getting up to go to the bathroom when I was pregnant was just a little something extra. Obviously you're growing an entire human, you're expanding as the time goes. And it just gets harder and harder to want to get up and go. But then there's still that almost criticism that you get for doing it. Like, the whole way that they view going to the bathroom in general is ridiculous. But especially while you're pregnant, they talk about your upline. While I was pregnant, my upline was also pregnant. My largest pins were all pregnant at the same time. The club owner's wife, the Syrian guy's wife, and I call her Brittany. She is the daughter to my upline, John and Barbara. That's their daughter-in-law. These it was the platinum, the emerald, the diamond. They were all pregnant at the same time. And I was pregnant around this time too. And you're right, you did have this expectation of the graceful way that they're walking around while they're pregnant, while you're the one who's trying to not go to the bathroom and throw up.
Yeah.
They didn't talk about that. I never heard about them being like have morning sickness or any type of sickness at all. When I'm sure they did, but you can't pass negative downline.
Yeah, no, I hated being pregnant. Like I hated being pregnant the first time. Mostly because like I am neurodivergent too. So like I have a lot of issues with sensory change and a lot of things were changing in my body really fast and I wasn't used to it. But there's like almost a shame around not liking being pregnant, even though there is such a difference between hating your pregnancy and hating being pregnant. They're not the same thing,
Right.
you know? So, but they treat it as if it's the same thing, like you're ungrateful for your pregnancy. And that's not what
Yeah.
you're trying to say. You're just saying, I'm uncomfortable because my body is ballooning out faster than I was expecting it to.
Yeah.
Like so much rapid change happens and nobody really prepares you for that. And nobody's
No.
really ever honest about what happens during pregnancy. They're just like, oh, it's beautiful. You glow. You get a little baby. It's a beautiful time. You know, you only get to do it a handful of times, and I love it. And, you know, I never really got to hear the dark sides of pregnancy, which is what I experienced. You know, I didn't have any complications, which I was really lucky for, but I was in a lot more pain than the average person because I have something called symphysis pubis dysfunction, which is like it's called SPD, which is basically my pubis bone was separating faster than it was supposed to, which you can't walk because what triggers it is the movement of your legs being shifted off. So like walking upstairs or like just walking in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, walking into major functions, stairs are major functions, um, sitting for long periods of time. So like any board plans, any major functions were just like extremely brutal. Like, and again, you don't want to get up and walk around because it's disrespectful to the speaker.
Yes. Which is
So,
so crazy to me because the amount of disrespect that they've given. But I think you bring up a good point. I also hated being pregnant.
yeah.
My first time and my second time. I love my babies, but they both came at a time that I was not prepared for. And both of them came from very toxic relationships. And I think that probably added into why my pregnancies were so, I guess, traumatic emotionally for me. But also, like, again, those changes, like you talked about, I liked feeling my baby kick because I knew he was alive.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't like it. It was very uncomfortable. It was weird. It kind of grossed me out every time. I was right there with you. I did not find pregnancy to be beautiful. I really just, I liked, once I got okay with the idea of being pregnant both times,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I get a human after this. Like, this is fine.
Yep.
And then they don't talk to you about like how painful breastfeeding is. That was painful. I didn't fucking know that. Nobody, they're like, oh, is he like, my baby just did it. What do you mean?
So bad. Like it
What do you
hurts.
mean you're right?
It hurts so bad. I remember I still like my midwife was like great because she gave me like because I ended up having a C-section, but she gave me like all my transcripts from like all my time, all my visits with her, all my time in the hospital, and like I was looking at like her notes and it was talking about like how my nipples looked after breastfeeding and it was like bruised, cracked, and purple, and like she was like, good, like this is how it's supposed to happen. And I was
No.
like reading over these notes and I was like, this is what it's supposed to be. This is being a human food machine. Like this is crazy. Breastfeeding was a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, it was hard. And they don't talk about that though. Like I never knew it was going to be painful with my first child. There was no lactation consult in the hospital I went to was shit. It was a military post. but it was not a good experience. The whole thing was horrible. I had shitty nurses. They were all assholes. I hated my midwife. I loved my surgeon doctor. She was great, but there was just no help. There's no lactation consultant. So our pediatrician was like, you need to stop trying. Your son's not gaining weight. Like, okay. And I was like, okay, I was shamed for it, but it was whatever. The second time, while I was in Worldwide, I have this like vision of like, okay, I'm going to do it this time. And I had a lactation consultant, and there was this expectation that it was going to happen. And then because of a major function, I was not able to be on that point. Because one thing, again, they don't fucking tell you is yes, there is a room for pumping, but you have to get up from your seat. That's usually in the middle of the fucking aisle. You have to walk. I was recovering from a C-section. This was 3 days afterwards. And up and downstairs, and go down to this room where you're curtained off, but it's weird.
The nursing room. I remember this room. Oh my goodness.
Yes, where you pump, and it was just uncomfortable. And honestly, like, who wants to get up that much? We were there for hours.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, the thing is Rianne would always do it. So if we were in the middle of a board plan, and she was not directly postpartum because she had 4 kids, and we watched her have 3. I mean she like had 3 while we were in the business.
Wow.
So we saw like that she would leave for like an hour of the board plan to go pump. So it wasn't necessarily like frowned upon, but it was like where like I only ever saw her go. So I was like, that's my upline diamond. It's like it's not just another cross line. Like I wasn't gonna ask the person who was hosting the board plan, hey, do you have a private room I can just like go into? And I don't want to take the bathroom up for an hour. You know what I mean? So it was like I remember missing out on pumping during my first board plan back, which was in January 2020. So like a month after I had my son. It was just very random and just not very planned to cater to us, if that makes sense. And it should have been more.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't dare expose a boob.
No, God, no. That is horrendous. You would not like God, it's insane the way that the diamonds were privileged. They had so many different options for pumping, and of course the guests were going to make sure that they specifically were taken care of, whereas us at the functions, the rooms were big. It was really awkward. There was sometimes wasn't even availability to sit down and do it. And you're sitting there, you're not supposed to be doing anything that's not Worldwide specific. So you couldn't watch YouTube videos. You couldn't be like, you just kind of had to sit there and stare at a wall. And you're supposed to do this every 2 hours. During a major function, that's not fucking possible. They don't even like it when you go to the bathroom every 4 hours. Like, it was just not feasible. But so with Worldwide and pregnancy, it is such an interesting perspective because it is different than being pregnant, I guess, maybe in quote, the real world or the regular lifestyles that we have today. So when you first found out that you were pregnant, were you guys anticipating you getting pregnant? Like, was that something you guys planned for?
No. Straight up, no. We didn't plan on it. But we weren't not planning on it either. Because we were like married for a while at that point, like 9 months. But we were young. We were 23. So we're still young parents when I first got pregnant. But yeah, no, we definitely weren't planning on it. Wasn't something I planned on doing yet, but it wasn't something I was not going to do, if that makes sense. Like I was still willing to do that. But
what was it like taking that information to your upline? How far along were you when you did tell your upline?
I found out that day, and we told our upline that day, and I was like 4 weeks. Like I was very early.
Right away.
I quit smoking in January of 2019, and then I started smoking again in February of 2019. And then my period was kind of irregular when I quit smoking because that just happens when you put that stress on your body. So then my period just wasn't coming. And I was like, oh, okay, it's just because I quit smoking a few months ago and my body's just trying to get back on track. And then I remember, because this is kind of a spicy story, as I was smoking a cigarette and I stomped on it and walked into the walk-in clinic to go get my pregnancy test. I was like, oh, it's not good. But yeah, no, and then the test came back positive, and I was like, oh, I thought it was just like an irregular period thing. Like,
Yeah.
But nope, it was a whole ass baby. So yeah.
I love the beginning. That's hilarious.
I
Like,
know. It was honestly like one of the biggest struggles I've ever had in my entire life was quitting smoking. It was like
oh,
it's a
I bet.
horrible time. And the first time I did that January was like super difficult. And of course I'm praised for it by my upline and everything. Like quitting smoking is good for you. I'm not telling you it's not good for you, but I'm not telling you it's easy. And
Right,
especially
right,
when it was masking a lot of the underlying mental health issues that I had.
right.
And then they started to like come out and I went, oh, I can't quit smoking yet. And then I got pregnant and then I had to quit smoking. So I was like,
Right.
oh, this is like a very nerve-wracking time because for lack of a better term, I'm raw dogging life. Like I can't just like, smoke a cigarette. I can't have a drink. I can't smoke weed. Like I can't do anything that I want to do to be able to forget about anything. And I think that was like a
Right.
really hard thing for me initially getting pregnant was the mental health battle that I was actually masking through drugs and alcohol that I didn't know I was masking through drugs and alcohol, if that makes
Right.
sense.
It does,
So,
especially being in worldwide where you're not really allowed to have those feelings too. Like
yeah.
that's the sad part about it. I'm trying to think of like when I told my upline because I actually was on this kind of really strange hiatus from worldwide when I got pregnant because basically what happened was my bitch ass upline, fucking Jenny, so if you guys know my story already, which Hope already does, but they very much coerced, not, I guess coerced might not be the right word, but they very much encouraged me to get back with my abuser. And I was going down to this area, fucking 6 hours away, one direction. I was going down there. I was getting my DV classes to get back in a relationship with him, whatever, right? Well, during this time, this motherfucker was cheating on me, and he told Jenny, and you know who withheld that information for a whole fucking month while I was still driving? That bitch ass Jenny. She told me when we fucking sat down at a Starbucks, okay? So this happened in June. And a month later, like my significant other, like basically, he really did coerce me out of my birth control, was like talking me into getting rid of it, giving me every excuse to do it, kind of at some points threatening me. Like it was bad. So I got off my birth control, immediately got pregnant. And so during that time, I did not fucking trust worldwide. I did not trust worldwide. So I was on this weird hiatus. So at some point after that, I did tell my upline that I was pregnant. And their reaction was very like awkward because I wasn't married. I didn't have the significant other who was in worldwide. It was very much, I would imagine, the same way that a very religious parent would look at their teenage daughter, despite the fact that I was 25.
Yeah, they were very like happy for us and they were like, let's just work on getting Hope free now. So she doesn't have to go back to work after having the baby.
Wild.
And at the time, that is what I wanted. Like,
Yeah.
that's a part of the reason why I joined was so I could be a stay-at-home mom. I don't want that now, but it's a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be. And
I do that
financially,
now. I
oh
hate my life.
man. Oh,
Pray for
it's like
me.
it's like, do you want to work 135 hours a week, 24/7, on call, no breaks, and make no money? Because that's what your life is as a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't want that. Yeah, no, it didn't make sense. I don't want it now. It made sense at the time.
Yeah,
But
of course.
um yeah, that's all they said was just working on getting me free. And we were like kind of panicking about it as we were like 23 years old. So yeah, it was a very weird time. They were like
I bet.
surprisingly supportive. I didn't think they were going to be. I thought they were going to be like, oh, we didn't plan on this, like.
Yeah. I'm happy
Um,
that they were though, because were you at all afraid to tell your upline that you were pregnant?
So slightly, yeah. Like I was like, I knew it wasn't part of our plan, like our 5-year plan or whatever, to
Yeah.
get pregnant when I did because we wanted me to at least be retired before I got pregnant. But at the time, like I wanted 4 kids before 30 was my goal. So I was like, I gotta start now. I'm 23.
Yeah.
If I want to have 4 kids by the time I'm 30, this is the time to start. So I want to start now. And it made sense, but they didn't like that idea. They weren't really on board with it. So I was slightly scared to tell them for sure.
Which is really interesting that they really had this hold over us where they thought they could control our fertility, whether that was we were having babies, we were not having babies, we were discouraged from having kids. You need to wait till you go platinum or above or diamond, or like the club owner's wife. She's like, we waited till we got into diamond qualification. It's like, bitch, I don't think you did. I don't think you knew you were going to be in diamond qualification.
Yeah.
You just happened to, it just happened to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is really frustrating.
A lot like prior to this, we were talking about miscarriages and stuff because they told me not to tell anybody until I was a certain amount along. But I said, I don't care. I'm gonna tell people when I'm comfortable telling people. So
Yeah.
I started telling people around, I think like I want to say 10 weeks, which is still pretty far along, like considering, because you have to wait till you're 12 or 13 or something. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start telling people. And then my upline like pulled me aside and was like, you're not supposed to tell people until you're in your second trimester. And I was like, what difference does it make? I was like, at this point, like I have just like I think it was like 1 or 2% chance more of miscarrying than I would have miscarried in 3 weeks. Like I'm just gonna start telling people because if I do miscarry, it's a conversation that we should be having.
Right.
And it's okay to have these conversations, but they definitely didn't want me passing negative downline or cross line.
Which is dumb.
Very dumb, especially when like that type of vulnerability can really help other women.
Yes. So. We were just talking about that too. Like you said, like we were like kind of speculating like how many women were going through that when we were at a major function and they couldn't tell us. They could not confide in another woman and say, like if you ask them like how's it going, they had to quite literally say I'm doing great, when it could have happened last night, it could have happened that morning, it could have happened at any point in time where they are sincerely struggling. And not even their up, I mean, I can't speak for everybody's upline, but I would imagine by the amount of stories that I heard now, I can't fucking imagine a single upline being actually genuinely supportive during that time. I can't see it. Very gut wrenching to think about that. But you're right. It's okay to have these conversations when you're ready to. Like we shouldn't make people feel uncomfortable or unsafe and make them feel like they can't have that conversation, because I'm sure I've never gone through it, so I can't speak to that. But I would imagine that at some point, I'm sure it would want to be discussed. I know that people that I know in my personal life, they'll take a certain amount of time and grieve and do what they need to do for themselves, but then they'll make a Facebook post about it, or they'll make a TikTok, or they'll do something to come out and talk about it because they feel they need to. And Worldwide never gives us that choice ever.
Yeah. And I know Rianne, the way that she carried, she started showing really early. So we found out when she was pregnant with her 4th baby when she was only 4 weeks, because she was already showing. Like her uterus was already bumping out because she had a baby in there. And so we found out very early with her. And I remember being like, but what if she was to miscarry? Like, how would that be handled? And like, how much faith can you have in thinking that you were going to carry that to term? Like, with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was a weird time because I know Mary, like Dawn and Mary, I know Mary had 2 miscarriages, but I think that's when she had cancer, like very recently. So, but they're really secretive about it. Even my upline struggled with fertility, and we didn't really know their whole story. Not that we should. Some people were not really comfortable telling us, but it was like an underlying thing of like you felt like you couldn't talk to them about a lot of your feelings and a lot of your thoughts that you had during pregnancy because they were struggling to get pregnant too. So kind of
Yeah.
going off topic a little bit, but they um I know that they struggled for a long time
Yeah.
to get pregnant. And when I was scared or in pain or not really enjoying myself and pretending I didn't want to throw up and I was exhausted and like all these things, all I could imagine was how sad she was that she couldn't get
Yeah.
pregnant naturally, you know? And it was just a really sad situation.
Yeah.
And I wish I felt more comfortable. She never made me feel that way. You know what I mean? That
Sure.
was
Yeah.
underlying for sure. Um, just not to talk to her about it. So,
Right.
but I mostly talked to Rianne throughout my whole pregnancy because she was the only person I knew in my upline that was pregnant ever. So
Yeah.
that was she was a different. She had a weird like bunch of pregnancies. So, but yeah, I think she like did one hospital birth, one birth center, and then two home births.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, it was very weird.
That's interesting. I think
Yeah.
it's, I mean, hey, whatever, I guess, whatever choices and options you have, I mean, that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I'm glad that they get to do that. But I think you're right. There is this stigma that mm, they do it in a way that's it's indirect. It's never like you cannot have this conversation. Sometimes it is, but it's very much that, well, I wouldn't have that conversation, which kind of tells you, okay, I can't talk about this. They didn't directly say that they wouldn't or that you couldn't, but they're saying that they wouldn't, which ultimately says I have to duplicate that. I can't have that conversation.
Yeah.
And that really puts you in a weird spot. And when I was pregnant, so my first pregnancy I had, of course, outside of Worldwide, which at that time, I was like 18, 19 years old. This was a shit show. I was a baby. It was a really crazy environment. Um, but even back then, like, the support that you have is very, very important. And as much as I want to think that my upline were supportive of me, it wasn't there. Because you're right. You can't have those like conversations of, I'm really feeling this way right now. Something about this isn't okay with me right
Mhm.
now. And you have a right to break down and say whatever the fuck you want, but you
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah. And it was like I had a lot of fear around becoming a parent just because like this might sound kind of weird, but like I'm not naturally very nurturing. So
I'm not either.
yeah, so I was like very nervous to kind of learn that part of me. And a lot of people said it would come to me instinctively to be an nurturing parent. It didn't. Just a heads up, it was very difficult to try to figure out a person. But I remember that was another thing. This is just a side note on their misogyny and their beliefs in that sense, is they just believed women were built one way and that
Yep.
you couldn't have any other feelings or thoughts outside of that. So they were like, of course you're nurturing, of course you're loving, of course you're all these things. And I was very like struggled to become that because I wasn't naturally that way. I am now. I'm more nurturing and more loving than I was 4 years ago, but it was a hard transition. And I couldn't even speak about that because
Yeah.
they made me feel like that should have been an instinct and I didn't have that instinct.
But that's
So
not fair to put that on you. I think your
yeah.
emotions here are totally valid. And again, you are bringing up so many conversations that, I mean, my parents never even had these conversations with me. I was very similar to you. I love that we have this in common because I've never really
Yeah.
talked to anybody who struggled. It took me, I want to say, 3 months to really feel connected to
Oh yeah.
my first child.
Yep.
3 full months because I was like in this like weird, I was in a toxic relationship. Their parent has not been around the entirety of their life at this point. That's 11 years. I was 18 years old getting to know this little human that I was not expecting in my life. And for a brief period of time, I did not want this human. If I'm being transparent, I was not prepared to be a parent. I was fucking 18 years old. And I
Well,
was
and your
really,
hormones play tricks on you too.
yes,
Like your postpartum is like actually really hard where you're like you have to snap out of it almost and realize
yes,
that all the emotions that you're feeling when you're like, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe, this is way too hard. Like, I don't, it's a lot of it is your hormones literally plummeting
Yeah.
after pregnancy. So, um, trying to trick your brain into getting back to normal is very hard. Like,
That's so validating.
yeah, it's,
Because I see it now as like, I would imagine what I was going through was postpartum depression, but I didn't know a lot about that. I didn't have a whole lot of support with that. And looking back, I really do think that that's what had happened to me. But my second child, that was totally different. Like, I connected with this little human right away. And I think, like you had talked about, it's because I had gone through so many years of becoming this parent that by the time it happened the second time, I was like, okay, I can do this. Like, I know what it's like to
yeah,
love another human. I'm capable of it. And but again, there were even times with my second baby where I was like, I don't know if this is okay. And we had that conversation before where I was like, this baby is a product of it. And
yeah,
that is a conversation that is very hard to have with anybody in worldwide
yeah,
because for them, they, and whether they had gone through it or not, they would never tell you. They would never once try to quote pass negative downline. It's very much this consistency of toxic positivity where you are a woman and you are expected to be a specific parent the way that you're seeing your upline be.
yeah.
And these are the really raw parts of pregnancy that like you could have with a friend, like that we're having right now. You're
Yeah,
pregnant right now and we're
yeah,
having that conversation and it's fucking okay.
yeah.
But there it was not okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, I'll put out trigger warning now because I'm gonna start talking about abortion. But it's a hard
Yeah.
conversation to have with people that are so ultra religious, that you want to explore some options because you aren't ready. Because how the hell are you supposed to have an adoption? You wouldn't be able to do an adoption in worldwide because how would you
No.
explain?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Um,
I'm gonna add this little trigger warning real quick.
yeah,
So we kind of went through this before with the COVID vaccine. So I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not here to attack whatever beliefs you have. Okay. If you're convicted in your beliefs, you have whatever you want. I'm speaking to people who are preaching this to an entire organization of people where they don't know all the entirety of people's backgrounds. It's very brainwashing. And this is Hope's opinion. She's speaking for herself. I'm speaking for myself. And if something we say you don't agree with, hey, I understand. If you are that angry about it, hey, we'll catch you in the next episode. Hopefully you come back. If you don't, that's fine. But either way, I just want people to know that I don't feel that Hope or anybody else should have to censor their stories because this is real, this is raw, and this is what we went through. And I would imagine that there are probably some other people who went through this too. So, with that being said, if we say something that offends you, I'm sorry, but I'm also not sorry. That's okay.
yeah.
Peace and love.
Yeah. But yeah, I never considered having an abortion with my son. Like it might have like trickled into my mind, but not like it would have been more of an intrusive thought than it actually was something I was ever considering. Um, but that's also my choice. Just want to make that very clear.
Yeah,
And
of course.
yeah, I'm very convicted in this, just so everybody knows. I will never ever be pro-life, and if you are, you're silly. That's all I have to say. And that's just my opinion. So whatever. The but I believe that there was probably a lot of women struggling or children that maybe shouldn't have been born that were born because of worldwide's beliefs. And
Yeah.
I could believe that there was a lot of abusive relationships in worldwide just because of books like Love and Respect and just the way that they just preached the patriarchy. Like that's just what it was.
Yeah.
Um, so I believe that there was probably a lot of situations where women had kids that they didn't want or weren't ready for because they didn't directly, again, this is all very indirect preaching about being pro-life and anti-abortion. They never outright had to say anything about it. I did have conversations with my upline about it where they were very clear that they were pro-life, and I was very much like, you guys are not right. Like, I was
Right.
like, that's all I have to say. I was like, if you believe a woman can carry a full term baby with no brain, like, I think that's wrong. And I think, like, there's just too much that can happen in a pregnancy that it doesn't work for everybody. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe in it some of the time. sometimes it is medically necessary to have an abortion, and so then you have to be pro-choice. If you go, I'm pro-life unless there's a risk to the mother, then you're pro-choice. Like, that's just what pro-choice is. You believe that women should have choice. So when you're preaching something like pro-life and you go, there's no exceptions to this, there's absolutely no exceptions, no terminating any bundle of cells in your body, then you're wrong. Like, you're plain wrong, because there is exceptions to that rule. Has to be. So I could fight about this like all day. Again, I think there was situations where women were suffering,
Yes.
and women weren't able to say that they were suffering because they were indirectly preaching all of this by preaching religion, which is, again, if this is your religious belief, that's your religious belief, but you have to be convicted in it. You have to know why you're saying that this is okay. You can't just say, my God says. Like, you
I
can't say
hated that. I hated
Like,
that statement so much.
oh, Rianne would post stuff on Instagram about being pro-life. And again, it was just like, it was when, I don't think it was when Roe v. Wade was being overturned, but it was definitely like a couple years ago. There was another big overturn of abortion in, I don't know what it was, but for some reason she was posting about it. I was like, we're never, ever going to get rid of abortion in Canada. Like,
just thinking that. I love how easy it is for her to post stuff like that, because she is so far disconnected from that happening to her. And then we just talked about this, where I'm open about the fact that before, you guys all knew me, hey, I was a horrible person. I had this very just ignorant belief, and I was even pro-life at one point, and I was an asshole about it. And I think what really just made me change my mind was having a child that was out of an abusive relationship. And I would be lying if I didn't say that that option crossed my mind, and that it was a genuine thought, and that I really was like, okay, like, it's okay if I make this decision. And I think that's really when my mind totally changed, but I couldn't say it yet because I was still with my abuser. I was around my abuser. And I feel the same way that you do. We're on the same page here. So, this is a safe space where if you do have these same beliefs, you're safe here. And if you don't, you're also safe here. Like, hey, you're allowed to have whatever you believe you want. Just don't push it onto people. And because we're not pushing our beliefs onto you. If it's somebody's opinion, no, I just mean, like, it's okay I think you're okay to say that because that's your personal opinion. And if you feel someone's wrong, hey, that's your opinion. And somebody else can, if they want to refute that, that's up to them. But I'm just saying, like, we can accept the fact that an individual person has their opinion, whether we choose to agree with it or think they're wrong. Great. What we're having, I think what the biggest fucking issue here is that we're talking about these people who are speaking on such large stages.
When you have somebody who preached about body autonomy when it came to the vaccine, and then doesn't preach about body autonomy when it comes to abortion, they're contradicting themselves.
Preach.
It doesn't work. Like, you can't, like, that's why I was like, I think you're stupid for not getting the vaccine, but I don't think that I should force something in your body, or the government should force something into your body, because if I'm going to believe in abortion, I have to believe that that's true, because I believe you in body autonomy. That's just the rule. So
no, totally. I love that you said that, and it's true. But it's really ironic that these Canadian leaders are so conservative.
When I was pregnant with my son, I had a hell of a pregnancy. I didn't have a good time. So the beauty of it was I didn't have to work because I was sick. So the government paid me money because I was sick. I could stay home and be sick for as long as I was sick. And then I had to go to the government and say, I had my baby, and then they switched my benefits to maternity benefits instead of medical leave benefits.
That's wild.
I didn't have to dig into any of my maternity leave before having my son. Like, it was very, very luxurious. That's why they say, like, when we first got pregnant, they're like, let's just work on getting Hope free, because if I got pregnant in March of 2019, I didn't go back to work until November of 2020.
Yeah.
So that's like a significant, I guess, enough time to build an eagle ship or something. Like, that's why they're like, you can do this. Like, I don't know what they teach you guys, because I don't know what you get for leave of any kind. I have a woman in my birthing class that was like, I could get 6 weeks disability, and she was from Minnesota. and she moved to Canada, and she's not yet a citizen, having a baby. And she's like, I could get 6 weeks disability. I'm like, what? Like, that's insane. I get 52 weeks divided between me and Fisher. Like, that's
I know how much time I have.
like, it sounds like 3 days.
Okay. So with the business, yeah, I got 3 days to recover with my little itty bitty newborn. They had this expectation. They literally coached me to have my baby, so I had enough time to go to spring leadership. That was actually a conversation with my upline, because my upline was going to be there when my baby was born. This was something that I fucked up. I had my upline in the room with me because my ex was not allowed at the hospital. Like, everybody knew within the hospital that this person is not allowed within any proximity of the hospital. And my mother was not allowed near the fucking hospital. And, my dad had to work. So it was very much like I had my roommate at the time, who I really regret not having in there. Honest to God, she is an amazing person. We're still friends. But Jenny was in the room. As soon as my baby was born, she left. She had to go back to work. I was so livid. And my roommate was there with me the entire day. Like, she was incredible. But it was definitely because my son had to be a planned C-section. I mean, we talked about doing the whole VBAC, but it was getting to the point where it wasn't going to happen. My little baby he was happy in there. By the time I was at 40 weeks where they wanted to do it, there was no progression at all. Like, he was happy and chilling. But there was, I had 2 weeks from my jobs because I was a part-time employee. So I didn't have maternity leave.
How did you do that? Like, I'm sorry, just to ask, like, did you do childcare, or like, how did that?
I worked from home, thankfully.
Oh, good.
So I had 2 jobs at that point, and no, that's a lie. I had 3 jobs, and I was a part-time employee for every single one of them. And thankfully, this C-section was thankfully easier than my first one. I don't know if that's a situation for everybody. So if that was not you, I'm so sorry. But for me, I was able to get up and walk that same day. I was not in a whole lot of pain. It was a fucking miracle and a blessing. And that's one of those things where I feel like the universe was on my side here, because I was a single mom. I had an older child, and then I had this baby. So I was okay to be back at work after 2 weeks. But it was hard, because with my first one, I had him in childcare, but then he was also homeschooled at the time too. So I was homeschooling him. I was doing work, and I had my little baby. So it was a lot.
Oh man, that's very tiring. It sounds
Plus
like
worldwide. Plus I was the entirety of my pregnancy, I did DoorDash, and I took my son with me, or Postmates, whichever. I was doing the apps plus my jobs. Yeah. And so I took my son with me, and like, we were just talking about this, where he remembers it positively, because he would get like free pizza sometimes, or most of the places would give him free something because they were like, oh, he's so cute. And they would do that to a lot of kids. And so he thinks of it very positively. But looking back, I'm like, I really did this just to scrape by for Worldwide, because I did not have enough money, even with 3 fucking jobs. If I didn't have a ditto to pay for fucking functions, I would have had plenty of money, and I wouldn't have had to do that, let alone have more than 2 jobs. And it was hard. But that's another thing that I think about with Worldwide. With my first child, I didn't have to work, thankfully. And that was because for the first 6 months, I was with my ex, who was military at the time, and they gave him paternity leave for a brief period of time. And there was enough money to where I could stay home and not have to work. And then when I left him, I did have to go back to my toxic ass mom, and she didn't force me to. Eventually she did, though. Eventually she was like, you need to get a fucking job. You're the worst child, blah, blah, blah. So I did. And that's one thing that I can say was different with Worldwide. I didn't look at childcare the way that I did when I was in Worldwide. They very much preach this, childcare is the worst. Do I have bad childcare stories? Yes, I do. I have one who we went to for a brief period of time, and she is in prison now. She was giving kids melatonin, and she was leaving to go tanning. My son was there during that time. If you guys are curious and want to look her up, her name is January Netherland, and she's from Bend, Oregon. You guys can look it up. It's all public information. The other one ran out of town because she was scamming people and was allegedly abusing kids. My kid came to me and told me that he was getting spanked by her. and I made a report immediately. And of course, everybody covered it up. But that lady, I want to do a whole deep dive into her. This woman is on her 4th name change. And oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's some shit with this woman. But with that being said, I know that there are some pretty horrendous things, but it's not as common as you guys think. Like, there are some amazing child cares that your kids can go to. And if you're a single parent and that is your option, no one should shame you into making that choice. No one should shame you for sending your kids to school if that's what you want to do. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, if you want to homeschool your kids, do it. Like,
Yeah.
I am for whatever you want to do that makes you comfortable. And if that means that you love your daycare provider, my parents loved theirs. My parents' daycare provider, they loved her. That was like a second parent to the kids. They didn't forget who their parents were. They're still closer to their parents than ever. Unlike the fact that these fucking people, I remember, what do I call them? I forgot what their pseudonyms are, but they're my emeralds. They are the bald guy and his wife, and they were accountants, CPAs, or whatever. And they were applying to the club owner. Okay, if you know, you know. They would always tell a story about her. She would say, I had to mark on my child care form that they were going to lie and say that my kid didn't take his first steps. Obviously, you guys know now that I have been to a number of daycares. I have interviewed a number of daycares, and I have seen a lot of fucking forms. And let me tell you, that was never on a single fucking one of them. No one was like, oh, we're going to lie to you to tell you about their first steps. They'll tell you. In fact, I had a child care provider who's so excited to tell me about something my son had done. I was not the least bit sad that I didn't see it for the first time because he kept doing it. Like, isn't it fucked up the way that they brainwash you into this shit and they use your children against you?
And you know what the funny part is like, again, Canada's very different. Alberta specifically actually just implemented $10 a day childcare, so it's only $10 a day to put your kid in childcare. So I get it's $895 a month for my day home, but I get $300 off and $266 from the government, so it's only like $330 a month for me to put my kid in a day home. And then I also get child tax from the Canadian government for $314 that covers that other part. So childcare is basically free here. So I can just work. And they tried to tell me, they're like, it's $1,200 a month out of pocket. And I was like, still, I don't know, I can make more than $1,200 a month going back to work though. Like, I even if I had to pay fully out of pocket, I'm making more money now than I was ever on maternity leave. It made more sense for me to go back to work.
That's your ditto.
Yeah.
A whole fucking ditto payment. That's what they were thinking of, which is really interesting because they really would. They would use pregnancy. They would use parenthood. And I feel like the way that they talked about parenthood in general is really frustrating because there's this whole glamorization of being a stay-at-home mom. And I don't like that stereotype because as a stay-at-home mother, there are times where it's really hard and they don't mention staying at home with neurodivergent children, except I guess now the club owner and his wife are using that as their quote sob story that their oldest child is autistic and apparently it's the worst thing that's ever fucking happened to them and they got to drive 2 hours to send their kid to school. It's all bullshit. I will continue to say that because Arizona, surprisingly enough, has even more social programs for kids with disabilities than Oregon. I was shocked by that, but they do. In fact, it doesn't matter what your income is as long as your child does not have anything in their name with over, I think it's $2,000. Doesn't matter their income. They could be fucking diamonds getting their fucking worldwide money and Amway money. And as long as their child qualifies, their kid's healthcare is free, 100% free. It covers everything from their therapies that they need. And even if they don't have this insurance, every single developmental preschool is free. And there's also a lot of different scholarships for kids with disabilities that'll pay for their maybe like an autism specific school. There's a lot of resources available here, and they have the audacity to use it as a fucking sob story to build the business. No, absolutely not.
But that's so wrong. I feel for that kid. Like, imagine hearing that later in life. Like, I mean, it depends, I guess, how severely, like, because autism's such a spectrum, right?
Right, yeah.
But if
it's
the kid's functioning
offensive.
enough, like he's gonna hear that story, or she, I can't remember what they had, but
It was a boy.
it was a boy.
Yeah,
Then yeah, they hear that story and they go, why did my mom and dad say that about me growing up?
exactly.
Like that's really uncool. Like, and to
Yeah.
use that as such a platform. Like
Yeah,
it's
it
so
hurt me
wrong.
so I was so angry the first time I heard that. I went on a huge fucking tangent more than I just did now because
Yeah.
I'm in their same state. I know what they have available to them. And for them to use that, and I'm sure they're preying upon other parents, like a single
Mm-hmm.
mom with an autistic child, I'm sure will hear like making extra money and being home with their child, da 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 da, right? Like it sounds fantastic, but it's just preying upon them and it's going to squeeze them of their resources that they already have.
Yeah.
But they glamorize parenthood, and there's no real discussion of what is it like to stay home with your child, but what is it like to stay home with a neurodivergent child? Because
Mm-hmm.
having a child with neurodivergence can have its moments of very difficult times. But again, you can't talk to your upline about it. And that was a thing that I struggled with because my child was severely ADHD, severely. This kid cannot function off his medication. And I'm okay to say that because he's my little buddy, he's my bestie, he's my everything. And he knows it too. He's very self aware. We always
Yeah.
talk about self awareness here. But they would always discourage medication. The club owner was one of those people who would discourage medication and how neurodivergence wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
Ironic now, but that was a hard thing as I could never go to my upline and say, my son's just having a really challenging day because it was never, you should take him to therapy. Maybe you should go see if there's any additional things that, he could need. Things like that. I was never allowed to have that conversation. It's like, oh, your son's fine. Oh, the system's just trying to tell you this. It's like, no, my son has severe ADHD, and there's an actual thing of where kids with ADHD can have meltdowns very similarly to children with autism. Like they have so many, like it's like a Venn diagram. There are things that they have in common. There's a lot of differences, but there are commonalities.
Still like
And
a neurodivergent type thing. It's like bipolar and BPD as far as I know. Like
yes,
they have overlaps just as much as ADHD and autism.
yeah, absolutely. But there was never like that conversation. So I'd have really hard times with my son and just think that this is the norm, that
Mm.
my upline goes through this with their kids too. They just don't tell me. But it's like maybe they didn't know. Maybe
Yeah.
their kid wasn't neurodivergent the same as mine. And if you don't have a child like mine, you don't have a right to tell me. You know what I
No.
mean? And
No.
that's the hard part about being pregnant or being a parent and having worldwide as your quote parents, as your everything, because they totally try to shift the way that you view things, and you don't actually have support the way that they want to say you do.
Yeah, exactly. Like they um I think my son's pretty normal. I think he's just 3, like with a lot of the ways that he behaves.
Yeah.
But he's most likely neurodivergent some kind because Fisher and I are. So there's a pretty high chance that he is. And I see it sometimes. He really lacks patience. He's really go, go, go. And he's been like that since he was a baby. So like there was a lot of when I first had him and he would get understimulated very easily and I wasn't like I just kept having to like show him new things and then put him in his exerciser because I was like, I don't have anything else except for these toys in this exerciser now. Like, and he wouldn't stay in one spot. He's never sat down and watched a movie, like just a very busy kid. Like he's just a busy, busy boy.
Yeah.
And but I couldn't wait to go back to work. I remember being very like at first I didn't want to go back. Like I was like, oh, maybe I should stay home. And then the pandemic happened. So I was cooped inside with a baby who was very busy. Um and then the option like I remember Fisher and I talked because I had the option to go back to Aurora and I was like, I don't know if I want to go back to Aurora. Like I don't really think it's something I should be doing. Um and then talked about it. And he's like, no, I think this is a good career move for you. Because I was like, going to go back to waitressing. Because it was more money at the time. But again, waitressing was so like, uh, I don't know, flip floppy because of the pandemic. So we didn't know if restaurants were closing again or like what was going to happen. So I ended up going back to Aurora and it was the best job I've ever had. Like I was super glad to go back. And there's been like some studies done that working is not bad for your kids. Like it's not a bad thing to do for them to have a working mother. Like it's okay to go out there and work. And I found, because my kid wasn't socialized properly in the first year of his life, because of the pandemic, I was looking more forward to putting him into daycare because I was like, I need you to go be around other kids and learn how to be around other kids. And I also don't know everything as a mother. I was okay to say, I don't know, I don't have all the resources. These people that run the day home may have more resources and they'll be able to keep you a little bit happier and busier than I can. Like I was okay to say that I wasn't the parent to, create stimulus bags and like, drawing all the time. Like I just, that stuff didn't come very naturally to me and
Yeah.
I felt like he deserved that.
Yeah.
So that's why I keep him in childcare, is because I feel like that socialization and those play times are very important
Yeah.
to him. So
Absolutely. And that's amazing. And you're right. You're absolutely right. And hey, I'm not a Pinterest mom either. I try my
yeah.
best. Like I have to be. I don't have a choice. It sucks. Like I
Yeah.
say that, but it's a good thing. My son has a number of therapies that are going to be helpful for him. And both the kids get socialized. So they have sports
Yeah.
and all the fun shit. But I think that you're right. And when we can look to, and that's the best thing about being outside of Worldwide, is being able to acknowledge that there's a wealth of knowledge fucking everywhere, that I don't
Yeah.
just have to go and rely on my upline who honest to God don't know shit. They don't know
Mhm.
anything that I need. I could not go to my upline and get advice as far as being a parent of an autistic child. There's no fucking way. Even if they were themselves, there is no transparency. Where I can get that
I don't even
information
know
is
if they'd believe you. Like I'm
they
like I
wouldn't.
know that like that's something controversial to say, but they
It's
would be
true.
like, "Oh, it's just a boy. He's just a boy. He's
Yep.
just
It's a
busy."
boy thing.
Yeah,
I
like he's just
hate that.
young. Like, because I get that a lot with my kid, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's neurodivergent. I don't think he's autistic yet. He might be. Like, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I definitely know he's different because I can see in the way he interacts and stuff. I'm like, you're built a little different. That's okay.
Yeah.
Um, but he, I don't think I'd be comfortable talking to anybody in Worldwide about that
No,
ever.
not at all. And that's the hard part because Worldwide, I think really it wasn't until I was out of Worldwide for 2 years when my baby was going on a year old when I finally really was out long enough to stop being brainwashed, because I went in with a level of brainwashing of my own, which they kind of actually reversed some of it, which is fantastic. I was really happy about it. But then there's other things that they brainwashed me in other ways. It is incredible. But when you're talking about a place like Worldwide, there's probably so many children, kind of the same way that you were talking about, there are children who probably should not have been born because
Yeah,
the moms really didn't want this. They wanted an option that could keep them with who they are and what they were comfortable with. I
right.
think that there's
Yeah.
also a lot of children who are lacking in resources because their parents are so against these labels, which is bullshit. And then we have people like the Wins who are making it sound like it's the worst thing in the world to have a neurodivergent child. It's a blessing, if I'm being honest.
So, like, you can be in denial about yourself, but your kids are going to show you
Yes.
that something is there for sure. So, like, even Nolan and Rianne, like, Rianne would always say that Nolan was dyslexic and was told he had ADHD when he was growing up, but these are just labels that schools try to put on you and whatever. And then she's like, "Oh, my daughter's crazy." She's like so busy, like they can't get her to stop. And I'm like, that's because she's probably neurodivergent, just like Nolan. Like, that's probably what is happening, and you don't know, you won't put a label on it, and you won't help her in the way that she needs to be helped.
Yes.
Which is very, very important because then you end up in situations with people who are undiagnosed who get into bad stuff because they need a hit of dopamine
Yes.
because their body doesn't produce it naturally.
Exactly.
Which was my big thing being pregnant. Like I said at the beginning, was like I was masking a lot of my mental health stuff with drugs and alcohol that I didn't realize was happening. I remember saying, I was like, I love alcohol because it makes my brain stop.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant, but I was like, it just, my thoughts don't go like they usually go. Like,
Yeah.
and
Right.
it was, and like how much I like energy drinks and like all these things that were just like super big clues that I can't have when I'm pregnant. Like
Right.
very like I'm not even medicated right now, but that's my own personal choice. I talked to my
Yeah.
midwife. She's like, "You can go on back on this medication." I was like, "No." I was like, "This is
Yeah.
my personal thing. I know what I'm comfortable with being pregnant, what I'm
Of
not.
course.
And,
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with an off-brand meth um, while I'm pregnant.
Right,
Um,
right. We'll get back
if
on
I
it when you're
can't have alcohol, I'm definitely not having that. So
right,
that's
right.
just my personal opinion. Um, but a lot of things are different this time too with being pregnant is like I lay down a lot more guilt free. Feels so
Yay.
good. You know, I don't have to go out every day and prospect. Um, I don't have to be pressured into doing things a different way. Like I was slightly pressured into a natural birth that ended in a C-section, and I was not, I wouldn't say shamed, but I definitely was like, oh, that sucks. Like, sorry you had a C-section, like whatever. um,
Right.
but this time I am gonna attempt the VBAC, for sure. I have some conditions on it, like if I go over like 41 weeks, then I'm probably like, just get the baby out, like that's okay.
Right.
But yeah, very like um conditional stuff, but a lot of it is just my own choice now, which it
Yeah.
feels like I don't have to run it by anybody. I can just say, this is what I have to run it by Fisher so he doesn't think I'm gonna die, but
Right,
I
right.
have to like um there's a lot of things that are just my choice now. You know, I can eat
Yeah.
deli meat because I want to eat deli meat and not have people stare at me. You know, like I just am doing stuff a lot differently now. Like I don't want to say I care less because it's like there's certain things that you're not supposed to do while you're pregnant that I'm doing because I'm comfortable with it
The
this
deli
time.
meat.
Because yeah, like I'm eating Subway. I don't care. Like it doesn't bug me.
Right.
I've jumped on a trampoline. You're not supposed to do that. Almost peed my pants, but like you should avoid that for that reason, but you're not supposed to do it because your placenta can detach or something. But again, these risks are like super low. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm
It's
just,
not like you're not consulting with a doctor. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like I went on an amusement park ride with my kid. Like I was like, I'm fine. Like I was like, I really think I'm okay. Like it wasn't like a roller coaster. It was like a small
oh,
ride,
yeah, yeah.
but like, you know what I mean? Um,
Exactly. And there's
and
no
I'm just
judgment.
whatever. Yeah, and I'm doing whatever I want this time. Um,
Right.
and it feels I'm a lot more free, you know. And the thing is about like not having drugs or alcohol this time is a lot easier because
Yeah,
I didn't want to, if that makes sense.
it does.
Like there's a lot less of a want now because it's like I planned on quitting smoking because unfortunately started smoking after having my son again.
It's
So
worldwide's fault.
yeah. So that was a silly, goofy move on my end because I was free from the nicotine addiction and I started again. But when I quit this time, I was like, it was way easier because I had a plan to do it anyway. It was just like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be 30 and smoking and like, you know, because
Yeah.
that start to like hurt me. I don't want to do that.
Once you
Uh,
get 30, it's crazy how that mentality happens. I just turned 30 and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to kill me.
yeah, like,
Like,
hey, I got SPF on my face every day. I gotta,
yes.
gotta be careful of how much Red Bull I'm drinking. Like, you know,
Yeah. You
all
start
these
to
like,
think about shit. It's stupid.
I
But no,
know.
I love all these things that you're saying because
Yeah.
in Worldwide, they make you feel like you're an individual, but you're not. You have to be a part of their cookie cutter system. And if I'm being honest, the idea of having a child within Worldwide and being in Worldwide is scary
Yeah.
because when you leave, you really start to realize the situations that you could have put your children in. And especially having boys, I think that
Hmm.
having boys and being a part of a organization like Worldwide is scary. I already have that struggle of like, I don't want my children to be anything like their biological father. However, I also don't want them to be like my upline. I don't want
Yeah.
this misogynistic view. I have a responsibility to ensure that my kids don't grow up as abusers, that they understand consent, that they understand not just consent for other people, but consent for themselves, that they have a choice the same way that every single person does. And with Worldwide,
there's a lot of toxic masculinity. Like, it was a very, like, you have to be this way, you're the man. Like, and I definitely don't want my son to feel ashamed. Like, he is such a sweetheart, like, in the way that he talks. Like, he watches Miss Rachel and he's like, I want to watch the one about my emotions. Like, he's like so sweet. And it's like, if I say like, oh, I don't think I can do that, he goes, you can do it, mommy, you can, like, you can do it. And I'm like, you're the best, man. Like, I never try to like shame him or anything for being sad, or I just ask him, I'm like, do you want to continue being sad, or do you want to start being happy? Like, and just working through those emotions and not being like, man up. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, right.
I feel, I don't know how much, like, what parenting was like in Worldwide because I left, but
I
have a feeling
it's hard.
it wasn't great.
No, as I was in for 3 years, and thankfully my son doesn't remember a lot of it, which I'm happy for, but I think it might be a trauma response because he was old. He was pretty old, but then again, his life really started when his little brother was born. So like life before then barely existed. But it was hard because you had a lot of these people who were doing things that they made you want to do that. And those were things I didn't want to do. My son was in daycare and I was okay with that. By the time my son finally finished daycare, and I had already wanted to homeschool him anyways. That was something that I always wanted because of the struggles that we had in daycare. My son had always, like, it sucks when you are in these environments where they're not equipped to deal with children with ADHD. And I know that there's a lot of fantastic places in the school system. So please understand, this is not me like trashing the school system. But I didn't want my son to fall through the cracks. I was already kind of traumatized with this. I don't want to do this to him. But I also didn't want to have, like, it was very much like I didn't want other kids to struggle. I didn't want the teacher to struggle. I just wanted to be able to do with him what he needed and really individualize things for him. But it was also like, I kind of felt like me saying all of that, it got to the point where that's what they wanted me to say. But that's what I always wanted to do anyways. But I did do a religious program while I was in Worldwide. A lot of it was because my sister did it too, and I needed someone to talk with. We stopped doing that curriculum. My son is with a school. He does online school. He has a teacher. He goes on campus. He has other students. He's like school, just virtual, because that's what works for him. And it was hard being a part of Worldwide and being a mom because I was also a single mom. And one thing that my dad has always praised me on that I never really understood until I got out of Worldwide was he would always say, you're really good at being the mom and the dad, because like we talked about, I didn't have that nurturing film because I didn't have a nurturing fucking mother. Like my mother is, I don't even talk to her. Like she was the person who hurt me the most in my life. So it's hard for me to have this idea of motherhood. But in Worldwide, I wasn't allowed to be mom and dad. I just had to be mom, and I had to be like these other moms. Especially, I'm not those fucking moms. I curse like a motherfucker. I listen to music that maybe they probably wouldn't let their fucking kids listen to. I made this poor kid listen to Christian music, which he doesn't even like. This kid, you guys, I'm really excited. He's listening to like early 2000s R&B music. He's been requesting. He's been requesting.
That's the best music ever made.
Yes, he's been requesting the song "Gangsta's Paradise" by Coolio. Rest in peace. He's every day, like, and he listens to the clean version of like he calls it the mom spaghetti song, but it's, everybody knows the Eminem song. He listens to the clean version. He fucking loves that song. Like, I feel like Worldwide made me feel like I had to shelter my kid from so many fucking different things that on a normal basis I wouldn't. We have the body autonomy conversations. He knows the names of body organs that in Worldwide they would have, oh my God, I can't believe you're saying that word in front of your child. Like, all of these different conservative beliefs that they forced, I'm so grateful that I don't have them anymore. And there really was a pressure to carry, like I said before, carry yourself the way that your upline does. And I was fucking tired of that. So I'm glad to be out of it. And it was all just so fucking bad. Like, if you guys are listening to this, please understand this organization is that fucking bad. It is. And if you're still in it, get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Respectfully, get the fuck out.
Yeah. It's, again, this pregnancy is way different. I have a lot more sense of self. A lot more understanding of what I need and what I want. I wasn't scared this time because it's funny because the first time you get pregnant, you're like, this is never going to end. My life is always this way. And then I have to push the baby out, which is very scary to think about while
Yes.
you're
Oh,
pregnant.
yeah.
And then you have to deal with postpartum, which is something you don't know. And then you have to deal with a human that you don't know and a body you don't understand because it looks so different. And this is another hot topic about worldwide that we could potentially go into. I know we're probably coming up on a lot of time here, but the way that they sexualize women is really
Yes.
hard to be a pregnant woman.
Yes. Oh
Just for
my
that
God,
reason
yes.
alone, I don't know if this is just a worldwide specific thing. I feel like we live in a society where the only part of us that isn't sexualized is from the neck up. The rest of it is the neck down is a sexualized organ. So when you
Yeah.
have things like giving birth and all the gross stuff that comes with giving birth and breastfeeding, all those parts of you are so sexualized that it's hard to think about them ever being damaged in a sense. You hear all these like stories about, I had a 4th-degree tear or I had a 3rd-degree tear and very scary things that you're like, did you ever look normal down there again? You know what I mean? And then
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
there's things like the husband stitch. I don't know if you know what that
Oh,
is.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like there's a lot when it comes to our bodies that mentally they barely belong to us because we don't feel like they do anything else other than give men pleasure. That's all we feel that their bodies do.
1000%. You are
So
so right. The absolutely. And I'll
that
take
was a
some
really
extra
hard
time.
part about being in worldwide. Like because they sexualized
Mm-hmm.
us so much, they made us feel like we only had one purpose, and that was to serve our husband.
Yep.
And if you didn't have the 6 weeks you can't have sex, like what is he gonna do? Like
Yep.
he's
They would
probably
talk
dying.
about that shit.
Well, they
Yeah.
talk about it in, I don't know if they talk about it in Love and Respect, but they definitely talk about it in other biblical books where they
Yeah.
talk about, pleasuring your husband in other ways while you're directly postpartum because he's
Yep.
suffering. Like,
Oh, even the upline say that shit.
yeah,
Like
it's,
it's so interesting too because I feel like you're right. This is a whole different
I
conversation.
know.
But no, I think you're
Yeah.
right. And the way that they body shame women if they don't look the specific way that their upline does. When all of your upline, let's be real, they're all getting plastic surgery because they can afford it now. And it really is just the worst thing to be a woman and to be in worldwide. And I really truly from the bottom of my soul think if you're still in, please get the fuck out because you are only harming yourself. And like you said, Hope, the worst thing is you're going to come out with, or the least you will come out with is financial struggle.
Yeah.
The most that can happen is you are going to harm yourself, your relationships, or even your children.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very messy place to be. I'm so glad I got out when I did. I literally found a note on my phone of me going to Jane, my upline, for a counsel and going, and my notes literally say love and respect and depression. So I went to her literally a month postpartum saying something's wrong with my head. Like it's not,
Yeah.
I'm not okay. I have to go on antidepressants now. And she went, no, you don't read this book. Right. And then it was also the time that I went and said, Love and Respect is a very evil book, and I want you to stop telling women to read it. And she was like, it's only bad if you're being abused. And I was like, you don't know that though. Like,
Right. You don't know who you're giving it to. You
and
don't
that
know
was
who's abusive.
January 2020. I went to her and I was like, these are a couple of things. And that was the last time I ever spoke to her.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was right after you had your baby.
Yeah, it was a month
And
after I had my kids.
It all comes full circle, you guys. This whole pregnancy shit, like pregnancy can be great. And it sounds like it's better outside of worldwide. But you guys, please understand that worldwide is really doing these things. And it's not just worldwide. Worldwide, it's LTD, it's any lines of affiliation with Amway. It could be other MLMs. I haven't been a part of those, but Amway specifically is doing this shit. So yes.
Amway is very patriarchal.
Yep.
I won't say that all men are like this. I don't believe all men are believe in misogyny. I don't think that that's a thing. I just think we need to hold men to a higher standard, and we need to hold them accountable. And I think the same thing for women too. So That's just my personal beliefs. But I think that if you're a man that believes in the patriarchy, and believes that men are better than women, that you're a bad man.
Yeah, no, you don't. Yeah, we can coexist with
Not
men.
really.
Just don't be a fucking idiot. Like,
Yeah.
don't be an abusive piece of shit. Don't be stupid. Like, I will
Yeah.
gladly say all of that. And my significant other hears it all the time because you know what? He's not. And
Yeah.
neither is your husband. And most of the men who've come on here who've taken accountability for how they were in Worldwide, we appreciate you. But you guys, we have been on here for so long. Hope's carrying a human. We got to let her go to bed because it's late right now. But I really appreciate you for coming back and having such a vulnerable conversation. And yeah, I'm really excited. We'll definitely get you guys a part 2, or even just maybe like an adjacent, because it's going to end up being a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to be like Hope and come have a conversation with us, please DM me on Instagram at exesandtea.podcast. Same goes for TikTok. You guys can find me anywhere where podcasts are heard, and we will catch you guys on the next episode.